We'll continue today with part 2 of the two witnesses. I finished part 1 beginning to discuss the meaning of the prophecy concerning the 1260 days. Most people believe in either a 3.5-year tribulation period or a 7-year tribulation period, with the last 3.5 years being the destructive period. Part of the reason that they believe this is because they believe that Revelations 11 outlines a 3.5-year period, and it does not. I will also discuss Daniel chapter 9 regarding the 7-year theory as well, and I will also give the identity of the other witness. The meaning of the 1260 days has been reserved until now. We read in Revelations 11, and I will give the two witnesses my prophecy, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in brokenness or in sackcloth. It does not say that they will prophesy for 1,260 days. It says they will prophesy of, or give the meaning to, the 1260 days. This revelation, as well as the restoration of the word of Elohim, will set the true witness apart from that which is false. An example of what is being restored is the 7th year Sabbath that begins tomorrow on April 5th on the pagan Roman calendar that man uses. Who is even considering the possibility that this is true? My father had me post a video on this subject in the beginning of February, and to date there has only been 17 views. No one wants to consider the reality of such a thing, yet it is a commandment. Why is this? It is the same way with nearly all of the videos that he has had me post. If I posted a video with some skimpily dressed young woman, maybe with a little cleavage showing, there would be thousands, maybe even millions of views by now if she was seductive enough looking. The 7th year Sabbath is just one of the many commandments that man has rejected. And why would anyone reject such a commandment? It's all about him being our provision and our rest. And what an awesome commandment that he's given us, as well as all of his commandments are awesome, and they're for us to teach us to trust in him and to know him. There has not been one question fired at me about this subject except from a close friend. Do you think that might change when the destruction intensifies? Yes, it will, but it will take much destruction for most. Most will hold fast to the lies or turn to the false prophets that are in place and set up. I can assure you that most will be without their normal jobs in the coming months anyway, so they will just be judged on their attitude to such commandments. Anyway, this is just one example. Much is being restored that man has lost, and clarification of truth is being offered, and it is being offered through his two witnesses, two of his sons who stand before him. I will continue discussing the meaning of the 1260 days. Noah was 544 years old when Yahweh commissioned him to build the ark. Man had an additional 66 years to respond to his warnings, to turn to him as news went out about Noah building this boat, but they would not. They simply scoffed, as most of you hearing this will scoff at what I am telling you today. He began to build it in the year 1590, counting from creation. I know there is much debate over what year we are in today, as well as differing opinions as to most of the dates associated with biblical history. I can assure you that I'm not interested in spending any time debating what I'm sharing with you about the dates, because I am not leaning on my own understanding or intellect in coming up with them. I've spoken in several segments that it is not about dates, because it is not. It is about man's rejection of their Creator's blueprint, therefore rejecting his purpose, which is to build his family. I say this, however, he is revealing these things at this time to explain to man how they have rejected his plan to build a family, even though he's continued to pour out his mercy on them. He is giving man a chance to repent and be forgiven, and a chance to turn to his word in order to become part of his family. He has not forced himself or his ways on us. We have a choice to want him. There are several prophecies in Scripture where a day refers to a year. This is the case with the 1260 days in Revelations. It refers to 1260 years, and there are 3.5 different 1260-year periods of time as defined by a time times and a half a time. If you add 3.5 1260-year periods from the year 1590, when Noah was given the decree to build the ark, you land in the year 6000. 3.5 times 1260 is 4,410 years. The year 6000 is the 6,000 years that he's allotted for man. These are the times and half a time that are referred to in the book of Daniel in one place and in Revelations. Man was given 6,000 years of self-rule as their greater purpose to call out and fashion the first fruits of his family. This 6,000 year phase will be cut short, just as Yeshua prophesied it would be in Matthew 24. And unless those days should be shortened, there would be no flesh saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. The following is just a brief summary of these divisions of 1260 years. In the 8th century BC, during the days of King Hezekiah, our Creator changed the rotations of the sun and the moon, and thus changed the length of our years. When he did this, our months changed from 30 days in length to an average of 29.53 days, and the years increased from 360 days to an average of 365.24 days. Because of the altered rotations, it now takes the orbits of the moon 19 years to return to its starting point. The 6,000 years would land in the year 2240 on the Roman calendar, but thankfully we do not have that long to wait. Yahweh has finished building his temple, which is made up of the first fruits of his creation, and time is being cut short. 12 of these 19-year time cycles, or 228 years. This is one time cycle for each of the 12 tribes of Israel. All of these things are symbolic with numbers that he's given us. This places the end of man's rule under the direction of Satan in the year 5772 on his calendar, which is the year 2012 on the false Gregorian calendar that's in place. There are false prophets who also claim Yeshua will return in this year, but their source is their father, Satan. But that is another topic. One of these false prophets actually understands that Yeshua will return on the Feast of First Fruits, such as called Pentecost as well, in modern day times, but to harvest his father's first fruits. However, this man does not accept the truth of how to calculate this date for the Feast of First Fruits, so he's off by 52 days. Before the two witnesses are discussed in Revelations 11, we read verse 2 that I read earlier in part 1. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given to the Gentiles, and the holy city shall be tread underfoot 42 months. Here we see a reference to 42 months that most believe equates to the 1260 days as well, based on the 30-day month, as I mentioned in part 1 as well. In order to understand, compare it to what all who have ever lived will be measured by or judged by. Yeshua tells us in John 12, "He that rejects me and receives not my speech has one that judges him. The word that I have spoken, this same shall judge him." It's just important to understand that that we're talking about prophecies here, and it's not written like plain English. Yeshua was speaking in plain English here. This certainly wasn't a prophecy, what he said about the word being what will judge all. Yeshua was the word of Elohim made flesh. Whoever rejects his word will be judged by his word, which was not his word, but his Father's word who sent him. The word is the measuring rod that Revelations 11:1 says that the temple was measured by. It has been measured because it has been built. But those outside of the temple, which is referring to those who were not of the scattered nations of Israel that the temple was built from, they were not measured by it yet. It was not given to them yet, so they could not be measured by it. It is being sent out to them this day, but it will take the wings of the coming destruction to carry it, because man will not receive it in their current pride-filled, self-righteous state. It will indeed go out into the world one way or another, though. Going forward, that which is outside of the temple is being offered a chance to be a part of a second harvest into his family, and they will be measured by his word through this process as well. Verse 2 of Revelations 11 tells us that the holy city would trample or be trampled for 42 months. What is this verse saying? Jerusalem is certainly being trampled underfoot today, and it has been for a lot longer than 3.5 years. It has been trodden underfoot by Islam since the 7th century AD, when they built the Dome of the Rock there. It was certainly being trampled underfoot by the Romans in the time that Yeshua walked there. Also, the false religions of Christianity and the false perversions of Judaism have been there for some time now, trampling underfoot for much more than 42 months. I'll explain this, but first I will begin with the first time. If we add the first 1260 year time to the year 1590, when Noah was given the decree to build the ark, we end up in the year 2850. The Exodus out of Egypt took place in the year 2448. This is 402 years short of the year 2850. If each time is 1260 years, then a half a time would be 630 years. If the last half of time ends in the year 6000 and it is cut short 228 days or 228 years, which it is, then 630 less 228 years is also 402 years. This shows that the half of time is 402 years long. This also shows that Yahweh was purposing to shorten the days all along, and he is also giving us signs that will validate the meaning of 42 months and other prophecies. Is this a coincidence that the Exodus was cut 402 years short of a 1260-year cycle, and that 228 years is also short of a half of a cycle? Is 402 years? If you want to call it that, that is certainly your choice. No, he is showing us the precision of his timing. He uses numbers as signs to us, just as he uses the luminaries that he gave us to keep track of time with. During the first 1260-year period, he delivered the only man left on earth who was faithful to him and walked with him in truth. He delivered him and his family, and the building of his family continued. The flood was a foreshadow of the coming destruction ahead of us, but this time it will not be by a flood. The flood was to teach man that if they walked with him, that they would live, and if they did not, they would die. Most all who have ever lived have obviously continued to have no fear of this warning, nor any of his warnings, just as Adam and Eve did not fear going against him when they chose right from wrong for themselves. Noah's sons and their families did not choose to stay on the narrow path after they came off the boat, although the truth continued through the lineage of Shem. It was 10 generations later before the next man is recorded to have walked with Elohim. Noah was still alive at this point, so it is safe to assume that he had a hand in helping groom Abram, who became Abraham. How many went their way that came from Noah's descendants after the flood? It appears nearly everyone. Most all perverted the truth and made up their own gods, even with the recent memory of the flood. Is it any different today? All nations and tongues came from the family of Noah, so we all get traced back to those roots. This era of time, with Abraham finding favor in the eyes of Elohim, and he promised to build a people from Abraham's loin. These stories reveal the effort that Elohim had to go through to mold this small flock of his first fruits into his character. The 12 tribes of Israel were formed, and after Joseph died, those who desired to walk with Elohim died as well, and their families went into captivity. His protection was removed from them. The physical captivity in Egypt represents a spiritual captivity that results when we turn our hearts from the truth and our ears from the truth that would set us free and that would keep us free. This first time period includes Elohim calling forth Moses into his service. Moses was groomed to free the children of the 12 tribes of Israel. These tribes that came through the Red Sea became an example of what not to do for all of us, instead of being an example to the world to what obedience would have resulted in. They did not inherit the Promised Land. The Promised Land is a dual representation of the coming millennium people are being offered a chance to live into today. The exodus ahead of us is an exodus from that which is false into that which is true. The Promised Land is both of these exoduses are to point us to is the eternal Promised Land of being in his family if we will hearken to his instructions to become his character, made in his image. Will you be a stiff-necked people as they were and hold on to your ways, or will you repent and enter into his rest? The first period of time was finished off with the end of time of the judges, when the period of the time the judges ended. 402 years after the Exodus began the second 1260-year period. This period begins in the year 2850. This was the time of the kings and when most of the prophecies were recorded. The stiffness of the minds of the children of Israel continued as they continued to reject their Creator's truth, except for, again, those of the small flock who loved him and hungered to be fed by him and under his wings. The 10 tribes of Israel were scattered during this second period of time, and they lost their identity as his children because of their disobedience. The tribe of Judah and Benjamin held on to the statutes and commandments on a physical plane, but They too began to mix in the traditions of men, but at least they held on to his calendar system for a period of time. They were also sent into captivity for 70 years as a warning, but they were allowed to return to Jerusalem to pave the way for his family to continue to grow through the coming of the Messiah. Both temples were built and destroyed in this era of time, and the Messiah was sent forth toward the end of it. I said I would discuss the prophecy in Daniel that most use to conjure up a 7-year tribulation. This prophecy was made and fulfilled in the second era of time. A decree to rebuild the second temple had gone out in the year 3300. This decree began the count of 70 weeks, which was a prophecy for 490 years that proves Yeshua was the Messiah. I want to interject that 1100 years into the time of man began a 490-year period of judgment that led to Noah's commission to build the ark in 1590 as well. This shows that there are other divisions of time going on within these 1260-year periods that link together. Also, in the year 4400 is when I believe that Jerusalem was conquered by Islam, and not in the year 4398 as some sources claim. So it shows a time in with 1100-year breaks as well. Again, I know that there are some brilliant minds out there that have come up with differing opinions of the dates for these events. They are simply off. They cannot even agree with one another, even though they are each convinced that they are right in their own minds. I certainly am far from being educated enough or smart enough to come up with these dates on my own, and I have not relied on my own understanding for them. 70 weeks times 7 days equals 490 days. 490 days is a prophecy for 490 years. Yeshua also used 70 times 7 as an example for how many times we are to forgive one another. Daniel gives the 490-year prophecy in Daniel 9. 70 weeks are decreed to your people and to the holy city to turn from your rebellion and to end your transgression and to cancel your evil perversions and to come to everlasting righteousness and to stop this vision and prophecy from needing to happen and to anoint the holy, holy, which is speaking of the Messiah, Yeshua. Daniel is warning them, as I am warning you this day, to repent and to turn to everlasting righteousness. We read the breakdown of 483 years, 483 of the 490 years in the next verse. Observe and be circumspect. After the going out of the ward to restore and to build Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks. This is 49 years. And 62 weeks the street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. And there certainly were troublous times still. I mean, Rome had conquered them just even 63 years before Yeshua's birth. The year 3300, when the decree was made, plus 3 years, plus 46 years, is the year that the second temple was finished, which was the year 3349, plus 434 years lands in the year 3783. Yeshua was 23 years old in this year. Verse continuing on, and after 62 weeks, or the 434 years, the Messiah shall make a covenant, not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with the deluge, and the end of the war decided, and these shall be made desolate. Yeshua came to give a covenant to Israel right on schedule, as Daniel had prophesied. Most scholars want to twist this prophecy to apply to the end and an antichrist that will come on the scene before his return. This verse explains that Yeshua would make the covenant, but that what would follow would be the destruction of the city and the temple, because they would reject it. The destruction did not happen right away after they killed him. It was exactly 40 years after he was murdered that the judgment came, and Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed by the Romans. The reason for this delay of 40 years is the same reason that the children of Israel were sent back to the desert for 40 years. It is a sign of judgment that proves it was Elohim's judgment, that he sent the Romans to destroy it, and it also proves that Yeshua was the Messiah. Just as the 402 or 40 and 2 will prove the two witnesses are his, who they are, his true servants. The scholars of the world teach that Yeshua's ministry lasted 3 years, and this is not true. He spoke the truth that was given to Israel for 7 years. It was heard throughout the land of the scattered tribes of Israel as well. We read this in the next verse about the 7 years, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. This is the remaining 7 years of the 490 years. And in half the week, or 3.5 years, he will cease and will be offered as a sacrifice unto the covering of abominations, and to make them desolate, even until the completion that is determined, that will be poured out to make desolate. Halfway through the 7 years, people started to rise up against his teachings and sought to put an end to him. This is difficult language to follow in the Hebrew text concerning the half of the week. It literally says in the Hebrew, it says, half week, cease, slaughter, offering, upon, covering, abominations, make desolate, until completion, decided, flow, forth, upon, and make desolate. What verse 27 is saying is that Yeshua would bring a covenant and present this covenant to Israel for 7 years, which he did. Halfway through this 7 years, the covenant would be rejected by many who would seek to destroy him, and this happened. It is also saying that he would be a sacrifice that would be offered for a covering of abominations until the end that was determined, when all that opposes his father's covenant will be made desolate. Of course, they were not allowed to accomplish their desire to kill him until the end of the 7 years was up, as was prophesied. I'm sure that this is far from what you have been taught that these verses say. The scholars have made these verses about an antichrist that will come and make a covenant of peace, and halfway through a 7-year tribulation period will break it off and make some sacrifice on the altar of a third temple that would have to be built. I hate to break the news to you folks, but there is no 7-year tribulation, and there are many anti-messiahs. Just as John said, there were many back then and would continue to be many until the time of the end. There are many false prophets as well. Most do not call themselves prophets, but if they tell you that this passage it says something else, they are acting as a prophet and they are false. And there is one false prophet in particular that I keep reference to in these segments who will deceive many in these last days, because his prophecies are riding on the wings of the destruction that is coming as well. And you are among this list of anti-messiahs if you do not lay hold of the covenant that he is offering, to turn to his way, to the ways of his Father, and be forgiven, and let him write his laws and his statutes in your inward parts. You actually are rejecting the blood of your Messiah. So this prophecy began with the decree to rebuild the temple in the year 3300. 70 prophetic weeks, or 490 years later, it ended with his murder, and the judgment came to further prove that he was the Messiah 40 years later with the destruction of the second temple. The second temple was destroyed in the year 3830, which was 70 AD. This is 484 years after it was built. This is important to keep in mind, because if it is a third time that 490 is going to be used to prove his judgment, then 6 years are missing. So we'll examine that a little further in a bit. The end of the second 1260-year period lands in the year 4110. This is exactly 350 years after Yeshua was born. Is this significant? In Genesis 9 we read, and Noah lived after the flood 350 years. These numbers are recorded for science if you want to hear. There is more that I will give in a moment, showing that the number 350 ties his word together with his prophecies even more. During the time from his murder until the beginning of the third 1260-year period, there were many false teachings circulating and being recorded. As the new religion of Christianity was being set up, the key to understanding the significance of these false teachings is understanding that the temple that our Creator has been building is his family. The instructions that he gave us to fashion us in his image with, in order to become part of his temple or his family, is his word. His word is holy. If you can pervert his word, you can make desolate the purpose of it, which is the purpose of it to build his family. It is an abominable thing to pervert his word. This was Satan's strategy to destroy the building process of the temple. The problem for Satan is that the word of Yahweh endures forever. It could not be destroyed except for within the hearts of men. He did accomplish deceiving the world, as the whole world, and as Revelation 12:9 said he would, by desolating the word of Elohim in the hearts of men. Yet Yahweh accomplished the purpose that it was sent, and the first phase of his family was built. Daniel tells us in Daniel 7:25 that Satan's servants would change time and laws, and he shall speak against the Most High's words, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and purpose to change times and laws. and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and a dividing of time. The King James translates this as he shall speak words against the Most High. No, the enemy is far more clever than that and far more deceptive than that. He speaks or preaches contrary to or that which opposes the word of Elohim. We also see in this verse another reference to a time, times, and a dividing of time. Is this referring to a 3.5 year period of time that some Antichrist coming on the scene? No. Saul of Tarsus's teachings have been putting the statutes of Elohim on the back burner and thus speaking contrary to his word since just a few years after his son's murder. He is one of many Antichrists that have come. He was the main player and still is the main player that Satan used to accomplish the deception of getting rid of our Creator's laws and his statutes, which are his words. By the year 350 AD, which was the year 4110, Saul's writings were set up to become divinely inspired texts that would become part of what is called the New Testament today, a big part of it. He was a false apostle who brought in damnable heresies to the true word that was recorded by the true eyewitnesses to Yeshua's testimony, primarily Matthew and John. There were all sorts of other false teachings that were circulating at this time as well, but by the year 4110, Saul's word was set up as the word of Elohim, and the growing false church built their new religion around his writings, rejecting the same writings of Yeshua that were in the same, that they put in the same New Testament writings. The same authorities of the emerging apostate church that accepted Saul's teachings as divinely inspired were the same authorities that were responsible for the blood of the true followers of Yeshua. There was, however, another shoe that needed to fall. The Jewish people who still remained in the tribe of Judah had continued to hold on to the correct method of determining when Yahweh's appointed times are. The second half of Daniel 7:25 was to change time. Isaiah 14 explains the reason that Satan would change time. It was because he purposed to set on the mountain of the appointed times. The appointed times are Yahweh's commanded assemblies and his feast. Satan accomplished his desire to set himself up as Lord of these appointed times by setting up a new calendar system that took people away from worshiping their Creator in truth. He claimed the worship of all who would follow his perverted calendar. The last domino to fall was in 356 AD, or in the year 4116, when these Jewish people who still held on to the correct calendar merged the true method of keeping track of time with the pagan Roman calendar that most still use today. This is when Saturday became the official day of worship for them, while the newly formed religion of Christianity had already set up Sunday. Prior to this, they used the correct method of using the new moons to determine when the weekly Sabbaths and other appointed times are, as recorded in Scripture. I mentioned that the Second Temple was destroyed 484 years after it was completed, and that if a third application of 490 years was being used as a sign that it was short 6 years. It ties in both of these events together. This change in the true calendar was made 6 years into the third 1260-year cycle, completing the destruction of that which builds the temple, which is his word. It was the year 1656 to further prove this, that the earth was destroyed by the flood, and this year, which was the year 4116, is exactly 1656 years to 2012, when all that opposes his word will again be destroyed. As I said earlier, these dates are not important in the sense that they are not what this is about. It is about believing and obeying our Creator and going his way, which will lead us into eternal life in his family. However, they are being given so that you will know who has the true prophecy of the 1260 years, the 1260 days. You are being given a warning to flee from the coming destruction by turning from your ways and turning to the words of your Creator and that were given through his servants. These are signs that are being given to you. They are not important in and of themselves except to point you to the truth. The question remains about the prophecy of 42 months in Revelations 11. It is translated that the holy city would be trodden underfoot for this period of time. To answer this question, you have to understand what is holy. As I said earlier in part 1, Jerusalem has already been trampled underfoot for much longer than 3.5 years, or even 1260 years for that matter. That which is holy is that which he is a part of. His holy city is his people. He dwells in them, Mount Zion. And his people have certainly been trodden underfoot for a longer period of time than 3.5 years or 1260 years as well. And his truth, or his word, is also holy, because it defines his character and what was used to build his temple with. And his truth has certainly been trodden underfoot for a longer period than 1260 years as well. This verse concerning the 40 and 2 months has another meaning that ties in with the story with Elisha. We read about in 2 Kings. And Elisha went up from there to Bethel, and as he was going up by the way, there came forth little children out of the city and mocked him and said to him, "Go up, you bald head, go up, you bald head." And he turned back and looked on them and cursed them in the name of Yahweh. And there came forth 2 she-bears out of the woods and tore 40 and 2 of them. The 40 and 2 months in Revelations 11 is definitely talking about the end that we're in. The first part of this verse explains that only the scattered nations of Israel were being measured by the word, but that the Gentiles were not measured by it. We're outside of the temple. The second part of it, this is a prophecy that says that those outside of the temple, meaning those in the world who were not measured by his word, will be measured by it for a period of 40 and 2 months. This is because the word is going to go out to them. Because his word will be rejected by most as it goes out, great destruction will be unleashed on the world, just as the 2 she-bears tore 42 of the children that day, which is symbolic of this coming time period. The 40 and 2 months are discussed in another place. They are referenced as 40 and 2 months in both places, one referring to the holy city trampling underfoot, and the other place is in Revelations 13, and they worship the dragon, which gave power to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, "Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" And there was given to him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and authority was given to him to continue 40 and 2 months. And he opened his mouth to blaspheme against Elohim, to blaspheme his name, which is his character, and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. The Greek manuscripts literally have an "and" between the 40 and the word 2. Yes, the King James uses this style throughout the Old and New Testament writings. However, I did not find the "and" between other numbers in the Hebrew and the Greek texts, except for in this reference to 40 and 2. And in one other case I found in the book of John, where the verse is quoted as 30 and 8 years, which will prove to reference another prophecy. It is important to understand that these are prophecies. They were not meant to be figured out. He has to give the interpretation of them, just as he had to do with Daniel and other examples. His interpretation of the 40 and 2 months is being given to you this day. I mentioned in part 1 that the period of the 6th trumpet would be for 402 days. This period will begin on June 12th of this year and end on July 18th when Yeshua returns in July 18th of 2012, when Yeshua returns in power and glory. June 12th is the day that many will be falsely observing the Feast of First Fruits this year on the wrong day, including the false prophet and those following him. This is an unusual year in that this false method of determining this feast will land on the same day as the day after the 7th Sabbath that the 50-day count is to begin from. Many will believe that this man is the real prophet because of the coming destruction, but in actuality, it is by design to filter out those who want to pick and choose which commands they want to follow, to filter out those who don't want to believe their Creator and His Word. This false prophet preaches correctly that we must live by every word of Elohim, but examine the facts. He cannot even believe the scriptures as to which day is the weekly Sabbath because he cannot believe what his Creator said about putting the moon here to determine his appointed times with. Neither of us is known to the world yet, so especially not me. So this will sound crazy to most of you, but the coming destruction will change that. In any case, either one of us or both of us is most certainly false. Let the word of Elohim help you decide which one it is. June 12th is Also 350 days from the day that this man says that he and his wife will be resurrected on the day that he claims Yeshua will return. This date is May 27th, 2012. I believe that he is correct, that by that time the world will blame him for the destruction that is going on in the world, because he will continue calling for it, as am I, and they will kill him and his wife 3.5 days earlier. The 27th will come and go and they will be buried, but the destruction will continue, and 49 days later the process will be repeated with me, this time with a different outcome, because 84 hours later Yeshua will return. This 350-day interval between the blowing of the sixth trumpet and their non-resurrection will prove his word and his true servants, but most who are still left alive will still not turn to his word in their stubborn pride. I say this to remind you that Saul of Tarsus was set up as that which made the word desolate 350 years after Yeshua's birth, just as these two false witnesses will be proven false 350 days after their testimony really takes off, because it will take off when the sixth trumpet sounds. So the 12th of June is the beginning of the year and a month and a day and an hour that's referenced in Revelations 9. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before Elohim, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, "Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates." And the four angels were loosed, and which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay a third part of men. The 40 and 2 months in Revelations 11 is this period of time. A year is 360 days plus 30 plus a 30-day month plus a period of days, which in this case is 12 days. The hour is referencing the precision of the timing. The judgment in Revelations 11 that is going out for these 402 days is referring to those outside of the court being trodden underfoot by the holy city. The holy city was built with the word. It is Mount Zion, holy Jerusalem. Just remember, the word is the measuring rod that all will be judged by. As I said earlier, and in part 1, the temple was built from the scattered tribes of Israel. The temple was measured by the word. Those who are part of the scattered nations of Israel who did not become part of his temple will continue to be measured by his word as well during this period of time if they're still alive. They are included at this point in that which is outside of the temple in the outer court. The fifth trumpet will be focused on these tribes will focus on these tribes to continue to call a people from them who were not sealed to live into the coming millennium, this new era of time when Yeshua returns. There will be lots of dynamics taking place during the coming months. It is all about that which is false being purged out, and those who embrace that which is false being purged out with it. In 2 weeks is Yahweh's Passover, and the night of the 18th of April. The false prophet has his followers observing this commanded memorial a night early, as he does every year, and so do tens of thousands of others. This is because they believe lies about how the beginning of a day is determined, because of applying scriptures that do not apply to this subject to their reasoning. What is ahead of us is all about believing our Creator's word and obeying it for the right motives, to be made in his image. Passover night is just 457 days before our Messiah returns. I want to mention briefly that the last half of time, I discussed in part 1 that a half a time is 630 years, but that the days would be cut short 228 years, making the half time 402 years. 2012 minus 402 is the year 1610. This is the year that the lost tribe of Manasseh was beginning to be called to what would later become the United States. This was all part of the birthright promises being awarded that were passed down from Jacob as the United States became the most blessed nation in the history of man. The blessings were given by design to be a witness to the world that man would reject him no matter what he blessed them with, apart from the hearts that were broken and desired him with all of their being, who became his first fruits. His cry is still going out to the scattered nations of Israel, and now it will go out to the world. Turn to him in truth. You have but a short time left before the destruction is let loose. He has established that he has raised me up as his end-time witness, and the last stone that his temple was finished with. The measuring rod has been identified, and he is restoring his word for all who will hear. I have been sent in the spirit of Elijah to proclaim for you to make straight your paths for the coming of the Son of Yahweh Elohim. I stand before my Father with the other witness that he gave us. Before the Song of Moses was given and commanded for the children of Israel to know and to teach to their children, Yahweh says this on Deuteronomy 31, and it shall be when many evils and troubles are befallen them, referring to the children of Israel, that this song shall testify before them as a witness, so that it would not be forgotten out of the mouths of their seeds. For I know their imaginations which they go about, even now, before I have brought them into the land which I swore. He is referring to the latter days. We read this a few verses later in verse 29, where Moses says, because I know that after my death you will utterly corrupt yourselves and turn aside from the way which I have commanded you, and evil will befall you in the latter days, because you will do evil in the sight of Yahweh to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. I suggest that you find out what work Moses is referring to and what evil and corruption that he is talking about. I will tell you it is explained just 2 verses earlier, and the whole song of Deuteronomy 32 spells it out. I have a segment on that too if you want to watch it that explains it in more detail. Verse 26, take this book of the Torah and put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of Yahweh your Elohim, that it will be there for a witness against you. His word is not against us, it is for us. It has a purpose, and that is to bring us into agreement with his character, so that he will adopt us into his family. It is the fact that that Israel has rejected it that is a witness against them. They rejected the word, just as it will be a witness against those outside of the court who are of the world if they reject it, as it goes forth. It is a rebellion to his word that will bring the coming judgment. I have held back actually using the words end time witness before now, because I have been waiting for the second witness to be revealed. In 1 John, this is he that came by water and blood, Yeshua the Messiah, not by water only, but by blood and by water and blood. It is the Spirit that bears witness, because the Spirit is truth. Because there are three that bear witness, the Spirit and the water and the blood, and these three agree in one. His word is this witness. His word became flesh. It was our Messiah. The translations of Revelations 11 saying that they will prophesy and they will lie dead in the streets of Jerusalem and such, hid this until my Father revealed the truth to me. The Greek word used for they and their and them to show that these verses reference 2 witnesses is Strong's number 846, which is autos. It typically means he or him or she or her, although sometimes it can mean they or their by the text. This word is used exactly 5,000 times in the writings of what is called the New Testament, and most of these times it is referring to a single person, but the translators translated it in the only way that they could, because it is definitely referring to 2 witnesses. It is just that the second witness is living in the other witness through the power of the 7 spirits of Elohim. This actually means that I am the second witness and not the first. The first witness is the word of Elohim who became flesh. These are the 2 sons who stand before him. His firstborn son is the first witness, who was the firstborn son into his family. I am the last of those sealed into his first fruits, the last son standing before him and standing beside the gold lampstand that pours out the oil. The oil is getting ready to be poured out to mankind, but they will have to want it, just as the first fruits have wanted it. Yeshua will not lie dead in the streets of Jerusalem that day with me, but he is living in me, writing his Father's and my Father's word in me, as he wants to do for each of you. His word will be a witness against all who reject it. You killed it once, and you will attempt to kill it again by killing the one who represents it, just as your ancestors have killed most of all of the prophets who represented his word before us. It is what it is. Scoffing or rejecting what I am telling you will not get you through the coming destruction into the millennial rule. My desire is that you will repent, because the kingdom of Elohim is at hand.